Not that long ago on the channel, I took a look at the Illegear Ionic 15, and in that video, many of you asked to look at the smaller brother, the Ionic 14 as well. Well, you guys are in luck, because Illegear sent me one to look at, and today we're going to do just that. Does the Ionic 14 sacrifice performance and usability in order to hit a smaller form factor? Well, let's find out with a deep dive into the Illegear Ionic 14. The Ionic 14 must admire its big brother a fair bit because of a lot of what the Ionic 14 is exactly the same as what you would find on the 15. This means that it's a creator-focused laptop with a Core i7-10510U, Intel UHD graphics, NVIDIA MX 250, a single stick of 16GB DDR4 RAM, a 256GB NVMe SSD, and an Intel Wireless AC 9560. Where it differs is in the battery, where you get a 47 Wh cell instead of a larger 92 Wh, and of course in the display, where it is a 14-inch IPS panel, the CMN 14D5 that is made by Innolux. Getting into the laptop is similarly as easy. Remove all the screws down the bottom, then pop the lid off. We get our first look at the cooling system, and well, to not much surprise, it is also a single fan dual heat pipe solution that we saw on the larger Ionic 15, and well, it did fine in that, so I expect it to do equally as well here. Not much else to see here, so let's get to examining the laptop physically. The Ionic 14 looks exactly as if you took a shrink ray to the Ionic 15, meaning that you get the same silver magnesium alloy body, which is pretty solid and visually looks similar except for a few parts, namely the corners of the laptop being rounder and the area around the screen hinges. Gone is the really hard angular edges and the random straight line that kind of goes down the back, now replaced with a smooth surface that tapers all the way, well, down the back. I say smooth, and maybe this is the best time to get into this as well. For whatever reason, the top, the wrist rest area, and even the touchpad feels smoother and much more refined than it was on the Ionic 15, and you can even hear the differences. The Ionic 14 just feels a lot better to touch and less like, I don't know, 2000 grit sandpaper? Being nearly a mini carbon copy has its ups and downs, however, and this applies to the ports. On the plus side, you get way more ports than you can ever expect to find on a machine of this size, with things like a full-sized Ethernet port, a full-sized HDMI port, 3 USB Type-A ports, a Type-C port, but on the minus side, this also means that one of the Type-A ports is USB 2.0, the Type-C port isn't Thunderbolt, and well, it isn't exactly a carbon copy on this, as there isn't a micro SD card slot. To be fair, of course, none of these are deal-breaking, so I am willing to give it a pass. Even the power brick is exactly the same as the one you would find on the Ionic 15, so you can add that to the list of similarities. With a dimension of 320mm wide, 214mm deep, and 20mm thick including the feet, 18mm if you're excluding that, and a weight of 1.09 kilograms, the Ionic 14 is really compact while also probably being the lightest 14-inch that I've ever handled, making it super easy and portable to bring around. Overall, physically, the laptop feels really solid due to the magnesium alloy body all around, and even better in terms of finishing, as I found these surfaces to be a bit more refined than that of the Ionic 15, which is great. There is a noticeable increase in build quality as well, which I definitely appreciate, and in terms of looks, the Ionic 14 looks better than the 15 I find, as it has a sleeker look, but it isn't exactly a looker, as there are definitely prettier laptops out there. The lid opening still follows the Ionic 15 in that it doesn't pass my one-handed opening test, but what is interesting, however, is how on the smaller Ionic 14 there is now a pronounced lip to help you open the screen easier. Yeah, I like that. With the lid open, we get a look at the webcam.
Or is it the webcam that looks at us? You know, because it's a camera. Yeah, okay, anyway. The video quality, well, it's nothing really to shout about, and the microphone quality is passable at best, but I mean, this is pretty much the status quo for laptop webcams these days.
The display is 60Hz and 100% sRGB calibrated, looks great, and interestingly is the exact same display that is used in the MSI Prestige 14 that I looked at earlier, which isn't exactly a good thing because it also suffers from not being able to get bright enough outdoors and quite a bit of glare in the display from the matte coating, but strangely enough, it actually gets dimmer than, well, the Prestige 14. Now, onto things that bugged me, the Illegear logo. Not that I dislike it or anything, but the logo right below the display not being vertically justified and centered just triggers my OCD a little. Moving lower and getting to the keyboard, full disclosure, the laptop that I got was before Illegear replaced all the keyboards in the Ionic line entirely, but I have asked them to let me test the newer ones, and after testing 3 Ionic 14s, I am happy to say that all of them have the much improved typing experience and are really solid. The backlighting though still isn't all that great and still looks pretty spotty, so yeah, at least you have the option to turn that off. Despite being smaller, Illegear hasn't shrunk the size of the touchpad, and again, I like that. Just like the Ionic 15, you can double tap the corner to lock it and it feels pretty good and smooth, even compared to its bigger brother. I find that it even tapers into the body way smoother than the Ionic 15, meaning that even hitting the edges of the touchpad into the body of the laptop is smoother and doesn't snag on your fingers. Onto the actual usage of the laptop, starting with the pre-installed software. Just like the Ionic 15, the system is pretty bare bones. You get the Illegear Command Center where you can mess around with some settings like profiles, as well as monitoring. And Sound Blaster Connect that, together with Sound Blaster Cinema 5 certification, helps to improve the sound quality of the speakers using equalizers and effects, which makes it a good time to get into the quality of the speakers. So here's how they sound like compared to the Ionic 15. Pretty good in my opinion, especially for a thin and light. Onto performance and benchmarks. In Cinebench R20, the Core i7-10510U got a multi-core score of about 1424 at a sustained clock of about 2.6 to 2.7 and at a temperature of 75 degrees Celsius. In single core, it got an average of about 422 running at 4 GHz at a core package temperature of 85 degrees Celsius. While running the multi-core benchmark, I took a hardware info 1 second timed interval reading, and as you can see, it starts off at about 3.6 GHz all-core before finally settling at about 2.5 to 2.6 GHz due to power and thermal constraints. We can see this more clearly the moment I plot the two, where starting off the CPU takes about 40 watts, hits 85 degrees Celsius, which is the thermal limit, and then it starts to throttle the CPU down while trying not to cross that thermal limit. What this means is that in the end, the CPU ran at about 21 watts to try and keep the thermals of the system under control. In the Blender BMW benchmark, it scored a time of 10 minutes and 4 seconds at a sustained clock of roughly 2.575 GHz and a core package temperature of 76 Celsius. Finally, in Crytek's new CryEngine Neon Noir Ray Tracing benchmark, it scored about 2530 at a CPU temperature average of 85 and a GPU temperature of 74. The strangest thing about this benchmark is that somehow it scored higher than the Ionic 15, and I've ran this test multiple times on both systems to verify this, and yeah, it just performs better, at least compared, well, to both my samples. Throughout the benchmark, as the CPU and GPU heated up, the chassis definitely got a bit warmer, but still wasn't too bad given how slim the machine is, with a definite hotspot at the center of the keyboard where the CPU is. When allowed to cool down, the CPU sat at an average idle temperature of 48 degrees Celsius. The fans, however, did get a bit audible on load compared to idle. This finally brings us to the battery life numbers. How long does it normally last? Well, writing up this review on it, listening to some YouTube and just browsing the web for a bit, the laptop lasted me a pretty good 7 hours and 45 minutes, and I'm pretty happy with this. I mean, it's not the 15 hours of battery life that I got on the Ionic 15, but this has about half the battery capacity, and that makes it almost exactly half the time as well, doesn't it? For what it's worth, at least it's longer than the MSI Prestige 14 that I looked at recently, and that one had a larger battery. Alright, let's bring things to the close on the Ionic 14. It shouldn't be a surprise that majority of my conclusions of the 15 should apply to the 14 as well, but what has changed, however, is apart from the obvious size shrink, the build quality is better, I feel, and this is something that I value greatly because to me, that's what makes the 14 feel more refined in comparison. It also looks better than the Ionic 15, so much so that I kinda wish that the 15 was more of an upsized 14 instead. Performance isn't sacrificed with the shrinking of the chassis as well, so you're not really giving up on anything in that department. Of course, there are things that still get to me, like, the keyboard is fixed and it is better, but the backlight is still pretty shoddy, and also the lack of a full-sized SD card slot, but honestly, off the top of my head, those are the only two things that I can think of, and that, to me, is saying a lot. I could go for better battery life as well, but I don't know, maybe that's something that can be addressed if Illegear ever does release a AMD Ryzen 4000 variant of this. You know, hey Illegear, what about it? Wink wink, nudge nudge. To that end though, I think if you're looking for a good and compact creator-focused laptop, I can wholeheartedly recommend the Illegear Ionic 14. Honey, I shrunk the Ionic. I think that's the best way I can describe this laptop. How many of you still remember that show? Anyway, if you like this video, do the usual YouTube thing of liking it, sharing it, and subscribing to my channel. Drop any comments down below on what you think of this laptop or what you'd like to see from me in the future, and of course don't forget to get notified and did I already ask to get subscribed? Okay, I did. I think I did. Don't forget to get notified for any of my future videos with the bell icon. My name is Yang, the Tech Rodent, and I will catch you guys in the next video.